Fittingly surrounded by a boulevard named after a colonel of the Battle of Austerlitz in the Napoleonic Wars, a commemorative column stands. As a carryover from paganism, Mercury flutters atop as the spirit of freedom. More often than not, the Parisian populace gathers under its shadow to voice their grievances, reprimand the Republic, and condemn the world in general. Engraved into the monument's sides, the names of fallen patriots from one of the country's many revolutions are engraved. A monument was first commissioned for the country's most famous revolution, however, in the form of a sculpted elephant. But, to everyone's disappointment, it didn't get past the stucco stage of production. Instead, one of the only reminders of 1789 comes from an outline of a fortress in the cobblestone. The square is named after this structure. It is the Place de la Bastille. This week, there will be crowds of people in the streets of Paris to celebrate the National Day of France. But let's scroll our timeline back 236 years to the founding of the Republic, when the explosions were not fireworks, and hunger rather than celebrations prevailed. To understand the nature of the events which would transpire, we must begin with a speech given at the Palace Royal. In part of this rousing speech, Desmoulins shouted the following as described in Sir Simon Schema's book, Citizens, a Chronicle of the French Revolution. To arms, and let us all take a green cockade, the colour of hope. At that moment, Desmoulins thought he saw police arrive, or so he claimed. The suspicion allowed him to pose as the imminent victim of tyranny. A new St. Bartholomew's Eve massacre impended, he warned it, a reference point that was already becoming an important cliché of patriot rhetoric. Pointing to his breast with one hand and waving a pistol in the other, Desmoulins defied the stooges of tyranny. Yes, it is I who call my brothers to freedom. I would die, rather than submit to servitude. This period lands 217 years since the body of the witness lay in the street, and so it may be interesting to note that a comparison to the St. Bartholomew's massacre was made frequently, though with ironic consequences, as a reason for the people to take up arms. The people first ransacked the Hôtel des Invalides and added about 30,000 firearms, as well as a small cannon, to their outraged participants. They had a conundrum. The guns had no gunpowder, and so they made their way to the famous prison. A fortress which they thought housed many political prisoners, torture chambers, and every dark piece of dungeon lore. When they arrived, members of the city's government demanded gunpowder. This was deliberated upon, and it was decided that the assembly would have to decide on the matter. The mob had no patience for such niceties, and after not much time began advancing. They surged into the courtyard, and breaking the chains of the drawbridge, entered the inner courtyard. At this point, it is said that the French guards asked them not to advance further, or be shot, which was mistaken for the opposite. This resulted in the inevitable, which brought forth the rumor that they had been drawn in to be massacred. Soon, rebel members of the French Guard joined in the fray, bringing cannons which were fired at the gate of the Bastille. Delaunay, the captain of the fort, threatened to blow up the 250 barrels of gunpowder, but, with his terms denied, the bluff was called and a flag of surrender was raised. The second drawbridge was lowered, and the spirit of the revolution revealed. An officer who held the key opening the door for the people had his hand cut off, which was paraded around the city, and later he was misidentified as having aimed a cannon at the crowd, and then was hanged. Delaunay was beaten and insulted, having had enough, asked for his death. After assaulting a pastry cook, he was riddled with pistol shots and every other item of vengeance. His head was sawed off with a pocket knife after the cook refused a sword. The mayor's head soon joined the parade. Though the fortress was held by a group of old soldiers with only 8 inmates, the Bastille would become a symbol of the revolution. It was the first time the common people had made a severe impact on the revolution, and inspired by the revolt, Louis XVI asked the Duke if there had been a revolt. The Duke responded with the famous, though probably apocryphal words, "No, sire, it is a revolution." The call of liberty, equality, and fraternity, or brotherhood, would now bring the reign of terror. The call for man's rights brought confusion and violence. This is what we would expect as Bible students from the words of prophecy. The Declaration of the Rights of Man, as penned by the authors of the Revolution, would unite the masses into conflict with authority. The result would be what the first file terms a noisome and grievous sore on those who worship the image of the papacy, and its effects are now felt to this day. The Roman family resemblance can be identified not only by the Gothic Notre Dame Cathedral and enmity with the English, but also by the Huguenot and Protestant blood that had freely flowed across its streets and through its canals. French conflict with the witnesses of God is described in the 11th chapter of Revelation as the dead bodies of the witness lying in the street of the great city. This street began its entanglement with the false prophet not at the time of the republics, when they would arise from the earth to take the political heavens, but at the fall of the Roman Empire. Just over 800 meters from the Pillar of Liberty, with the pagan goddess surrounded by cafes, theater, restaurants, and opera, lies the Seine, a reminder of the marshland which once had defined the capital of the country. The marshland gained the barbarian tribes of the region the symbolic representation of a frog. This was before being dubbed by His Holiness as the eldest son of the Church. Edward Gibbon writes in The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire in chapter 38 concerning the baptism of the Frankish king Leroy Clovis. On the memorable day when Clovis ascended from the baptismal font, he alone in the Christian world deserved the name and prerogatives of a Catholic king. The Emperor Anastasius entertained some dangerous errors concerning the nature of the divine incarnation, and the barbarians of Italy, Africa, Spain, and Gaul were involved in the Arian heresy. The eldest, or rather the only son of the Church, was acknowledged by the clergy as their lawful sovereign or glorious deliverer, and the arms of Clovis were strenuously supported by the zeal and favor of the Catholic faction. 13 centuries later, along with the melting of crucifixes, church bells, and church images, another symbol was cast into canon, the symbolism of monarchy and privilege. One such icon, at times its outline still visible on once affluent but now antiquated buildings, is the fleur-de-lis. The fleur-de-lis was adopted by Clovis, according to legend, at his conversion in the place of frogs, usually paired together in a group of 3. The frog, like the lion of Britain, was synonymous with the nation of France. With the adoption of the fleur-de-lis at the nation's baptism, it is interesting that the frog is primarily used of the nation in its pagan form. The only use of the frogs in the apocalypse is to describe the French spirit which will bring the nations to fight in the place of the Hebrew tongue against the Lamb. As we read in Revelation chapter 16, "And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty." It is interesting to note that the ideology of the French, or frog peoples, came from the pouring out of the first vial. The ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, spirits of madness and chaos, are not restricted to the masses of the earth, but are seen coming from the highest authorities. Psalm 105 verse 3 reads, "Their land brought forth frogs in abundance, and the chambers of their kings." The spirit of France would not be an isolated event, but would ultimately reach every edge of the planet, assisted by the largely European socialist East, the nationalist West, and the papacy. As a result, the Bastille is a favorite comparison for the modern day and recent Hong Kong protests, Yellow Vest riots, Arab Spring, Russian Revolution, throughout the African uprisings, and the modern protest movement in general. The issue with the desire for things of liberty, equality, and brotherhood is that it is a program to lift the self up by the arm of self. The only result is the pride of man, and an adoption of the mind of an agnostic. Psalm 10 verses 1-4 reads, "For the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blesseth the covetous, whom the Lord abhorreth. The wicked through the pride of his countenance will not seek after God. God is not in all his thoughts." Even this week we saw the result of the frog spirit from the podium of the Republic. Macron said on the eve of Bastille Day, as reported by France 24 News, "Since 1945, freedom has never been so threatened and never so seriously. To be free in this world, we must be feared. To be feared, we must be powerful." The celebrations would include, as documented by Le Monde, a parade designed as a true military operation, including a record of 7,000 personnel. It can be no mistake that the celebration of the birthplace of the frog spirits came with the flex of the arm of man, historically the largest in Western Europe. Ultimately, this spirit will unite the nations to rise in the pride of man against the king of the earth. Graham Pierce in Babylon and Jerusalem states the following: "With these great changes, there has come a developing tide of godlessness. Education, science, invention, industrial development has given man a sense of great importance and a feeling of self-sufficiency. He does not want God. When Christ is back on the earth and demands the submission of Europe to his righteous laws, he will be met with defiance. A vast image of human power will be formed against him, that image of Nebuchadnezzar of the latter days, and the nations will confederate against him." This spirit of liberty, equality, and fraternity has instigated into the populace of the globe, not peace on earth, but the pride of man. We will conclude with the passage that Brother Graham references taken from the 2nd Psalm. "The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, Let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill of Zion." And so our exhortation is, "Be wise now, therefore, O ye kings, be instructed, ye judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling." This is Bible in the News.